All right, Trevor. So let's dive into the next part of today's show, and we're going to talk about what this game means for Notre Dame. This is a huge, huge game. Obviously, when you talk about it, it's not just the ranked on rank. So we're talking about a game on Saturday afternoon, 3:30 p.m. Notre Dame is a 6-point favorite, which I was a little surprised by. It was 6.5. It's now down to 6. And Louisville comes in ranked 15th in the country. Notre Dame is ranked 16th in the country. I was just kind of, and again, I'm not a bettor, so I don't have any knowledge to back. It's just more of a gut. I thought it'd be like a 3.5-point game. I thought it'd be kind of like the spread where A&M was favored over Notre Dame. Like, yeah, it's at home, but the other team's ranked higher and all that kind of stuff. But it's a 6-point spread. And Notre Dame's coming off of their win. Obviously, Louisville coming off of a 12-point win over Georgia Tech. And it was a very good football game, very back-and-forth football game. Yeah. Georgia Tech went up early. Then Louisville ran off 17 straight. Then Georgia Tech came back and tied it. And then, Louisville went back ahead. And it was a closer game than a 12-point margin. But I did feel watching it that Louisville was the better team. It wasn't like, oh, man, like they caught this break and that break. So, like, Louisville's first touchdown came on a fumble return, but it was a bad play by the quarterback, but it was also a great play by the Louisville defense. And he made a bad play because they were swarming him. And so I was like, yeah, okay, that was a bad play, but you forced that bad play, And then their last score to kind of put the game away was the return of a blocked field goal. Well, you had to block it first before you could return it for a touchdown, So was impressed with Louisville. They hadn't been challenged their first two games at all. I mean, they played two really bad football teams to start the season off. And so they got challenged on Saturday by Georgia Tech, and they stepped up and answered that challenge. And so continue to be impressed by this Louisville football team, Trevor. But this is a big moment for Notre Dame. And we're going to look at this really in all aspects. And the biggest one is, we'll get into how it impacts the season right now. But the biggest one is, this is a Notre Dame team that's 3-1 and ranked number 16 in the country. And if you were to kind of take a temperature of the fan base and the coverage of the team, you'd think this team was going through another 2016 season. Yeah. And I understand why, because I don't agree with a lot of it, and I don't agree with the angst of it, but I also understand it because of the expectations that you had on the team. And even in some of the wins, they didn't necessarily look great. Like Saturday, they did not play great football. They just kind of out-talented that other team. And so you're looking at this team, so yeah, they're 3-1, yeah, they're ranked 16, but they're not playing the way that they should be. I think some of the reactions to that are a little bit too harsh. It's one thing to be critical of it. It's another thing to go to that degree. But I understand the frustration. And that's part of what makes this game so important. Because this is not, and I've said this, there's not a singular game on the season that just wipes out either Northern Illinois or tells us, okay, Notre Dame has turned the corner. And the reason I say that is not because none of these teams are good. This is a very good football team. USC showed in their loss to Michigan. They're still a really good football team. Yeah. That was a very well played game. It's not so much that it's okay, but we don't know who's going to show up week to week. Like, you could beat Louisville by 30 on Saturday and then go beat Stanford by a field goal or even lose to Stanford, because this is a better Stanford team than the one that beat you 2 years ago. And I think that's really why I say no one game says that's been fixed. I don't care if you beat Louisville by 50, it doesn't say that, because it comes a week after you kind of sleptwalk through beating Miami of Ohio. And so, but what it does, however, is it starts to, I think a lot of people to turn the emotional corner and say, okay, the more you play well, the more you win, the more the Northern Illinois game is the anomaly. And right now, that wound is still real fresh, right? Yeah. Like this past weekend, I got a new infection in that wound by how they played against Miami of Ohio, right? Like, so it's still healing. I get it.
Yep.
You go out and win this game. I don't care if it's by a point or 40. Just play well and show that, hey, you're a good football team. Then I think that helps you kind of turn the corner a little bit emotionally as a fan base, but even more importantly as a team. Like, hey, guys, we are a really good team. When you're talking about the guys in the locker room and you talk about, hey, we are a really good team. We are a good football team. And we showed it on Saturday. Now let's build on that. I think that's obviously what's at stake. But if you lose this game, then the toxicity that surrounds your program, I don't know that it goes away the rest of the year. I mean, it sucks to say that, but I'm trying to be realistic. I don't know if you can kind of recover your momentum the remainder of the year because of what's left on your schedule. And part of that's not your fault because Florida State sucks. And that was, would have been a chance to get a late season top 10 win, those type of things. But, you know, it was never as bad as the emotional reactions were making it seem. But even the wins are still not as good as what this team should be. And now you get a chance to go out there this weekend and say, hey, listen, we're going to show you who we are. And they are going to show the world who they are this weekend. The only question is, Trevor, but what story are they going to tell? Right? Like, so we're going to know who Notre Dame is after this weekend, folks. That's not me taunting they're going to smash Louisville. That's me saying one way or the other, we're going to find out who this football team is. And it's going to have a big impact on how people are going to feel for the next several months. And maybe that's fair, not fair. But it's a fact, in my opinion.
I talked about it after the Northern Illinois game during Purdue week, and Notre Dame, for them to start this almost recovery process, there's going to be multiple steps in it because, to your point, Brian, there's going to be no game throughout the rest of this regular season where we're going to get to December and we're like, Northern Illinois, what happened? We're always going to remember it. The opposing teams that Notre Dame has on the schedule are going to remember it, right? So let's just call that a constant. What Notre Dame did to Purdue, I think, helped buy back some of the team. And I'm not here to say that they were losing buyout from the team, but what Notre Dame did to Purdue was that, you go on the road to a Big Ten team. It's a rivalry game. It's historic. There's a trophy that you're playing for, and you beat them by 59 points on the road. I think that goes back and shows you that you are a good football team again. What the Louisville game has the opportunity to do for you as a program is start to buy back some of the fan base, because there is a little bit of, no, it's definitely not as bad as what some people make it out to be, but it's also not where we want it to be. You know what I mean? So that's, to me, what is at stake at the Louisville game, because there's a good amount of people on this team that remember what Louisville did to them last year on a national stage under the lights. And there's an opportunity for Notre Dame to come out fired up. And I don't want to preach revenge tour, because I think there are some players and coaches that are a little bit more disciplined than that for, this whole season to be about beating Louisville because of what happened last October. But I think there has to be a little bit of that. Marcus Freeman even brought it up in his press conference that sometimes you kind of have to go to that dark place to start finding the juice somewhere. And, I think if Notre Dame is able to play the way that we all believe that they can and have shown flashes of them being able to, they're going to start to course correct a lot of the mistakes that were made last week against Miami of Ohio. And they're going to slowly start putting Miami of Ohio or Northern Illinois in the rearview mirror. And it's going to get farther and farther away. It's something you're never going to forget. But
the fans won't.
Good win. Sure,
the fans won't. But I do think the team puts it behind them if they play well Saturday. And I think that's obviously more important than what we think and what fans think, right? I know fans don't think that what we think is more important, but what matters is what the team thinks, Trevor. And to your point, and the revenge factor is interesting because as a coach, I kind of like using that, but you got to use it the right way.
Sure.
I'm using it as a little extra motivation. Like, and Sean Davis and I have talked about this. I still remember being there last year and watching Howard Cross stand there and watch Louisville celebrate. And you're thinking, like, this is going to be something that he clearly remembers. Like, he's not putting this aside. He remembers this one. But then you watch how Trevor's played so far this year, and you're like, yeah, but I don't know how much he's kind of taken away from this one. You know what I mean? Like, what is he learning in this one? And you say, but is this the game that maybe it's the wake-up call for him? And so there's just a lot of different aspects to it where I'm always looking for a little bit of an edge with a football team. And that was one of the things I hated about Brian Kelly is he would completely spend all week tamping down that there was anything to play for in this game other than just it's another Saturday. And that's a mistake. Just like it's a mistake about making your entire preparation be about revenge. You got to find that sweet spot in there. But Notre Dame got embarrassed by Louisville last year.
Yeah.
And not just with the convincing 13-point loss, which the game was closer than that for a while, but then the way the game played out in the second half, it wasn't that close. Like first half, it was two teams not playing well, two great defenses, two offenses struggling. Second half, it was both defenses still played well, but one offense just completely went in the tank, and it wasn't Louisville's. You know what I mean?
Sure
And
wasn't.
so I do think there needs to be something along those lines with this team, but you've got to make sure that it's still about, hey, you're going to go in there, you're going to play hard, because like somebody just said, 5 turnovers will have that effect. That's not even what bothered me about last year's game. What bothered me about last year's game is your offensive line went into that game and physically got their butts handed to them. You didn't even compete in that regard. You had dumb penalties. Look, 5 turnovers and all. It's true. You don't have a hands to the face by your right tackle, who should never do that. I mean, that negates a 30-yard bomb that it was what, 17-10. That pass to Mitchell Evans gets him into scoring range, and all of a sudden you go down there and score. It's a different ball game. It's the drop pass by Chris Tyree in the end zone when it was it was tied 7-7. You had just forced a fumble. Cam Hart had just forced a fumble, and you got a guy open. Great play call. Chris Tyree open in the end zone. He drops it, and you settle for a field goal. And it was that your team was not locked in. Your team was not focused. Your team didn't fight enough in this game. And even the defense, as well as they played for 3 quarters, they kind of buckled late in that game and gave up a couple big runs and let Louisville bury them. So your hope, and the reason I bring this up, because there's a lot of guys coming back from last year's team still on this football team.
Yeah.
And I just kind of feel like if you're a true competitor, you got to focus on what's in front of you now. But if you're a true competitor, I got to think last year's game is still in your mind. Like when the Lakers and Celtics played in, what was it, 80? The Celtics beat the Lakers in 84. You don't think that, like, 3 years later, the next time they played in the finals, even 3 years later, that Magic wasn't thinking about 84? You know what I mean? Like, of course he was. And so that to me is just kind of, if you're a great competitor, it shouldn't dominate necessarily everything you're doing. I've had a picture of Jeff Brom on my wall ever since that game. No, I mean, it shouldn't be that. That's, you might need to see somebody about that, but there's got to be a sense of, man, I'm digging deep, because I got embarrassed by this team last year. Like, I want to see Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan come out with something to prove, not just because they're now starters and they were backups, because they watched film of last year's game saying, like, what the heck was that? That's embarrassing. I want to rewrite this script a little bit. That's where I'm coming from, Trevor. Because one of the big questions I have with this football team is what drives them? What gets them fired up?
Sure.
Do we know that right now? Yeah, they came out against Purdue pissed off, and we didn't. And I said, I want to see this team and it lasted 1 week, and then we came and watched this team. Now, did it last 1 week because the players are a little bit too focused on what's coming next week? We're gonna find out, and I hope that that's what it was, which is also human nature, right? You kind of understand. You know what? They were thinking about a different team in red and white, and it wasn't Miami. They were thinking of a different team with a bird logo, and it wasn't a Red Hawk. Okay, cool. Then come out and back that up. So, like, that's something else, Trevor, is I think we're going to learn something about the competitive spirit of this football team by how they perform on Saturday.
Couldn't agree more. If you're a ball player, man, and you just know that this team, where, it's not the same exact Louisville offense from last year, but just like Notre Dame, Louisville has a good amount of players that were on that same team last year. And for me, when I think about it, if somebody were to beat me like that, sometimes what I do is I put myself in the mindset of the other person. And I start to think, like, what do they think of me? I'm just a pushover. And I'm just, if I'm somebody like Howard Cross and I'm somebody like Riley Mills, and I just think back to, man, this offense put up 185 yards on me on the ground, almost at will. Especially at certain points in the game. And if I'm doing that, I take that personally. Not to take the Michael Jordan quote from The Last Dance, but I do take that personal. Because the reason why is because I think about what the other offensive line thinks about me. It's like, oh, we're going up against Riley Mills and Howard Cross. Yeah, cool. Let's just run for another $185 again. That gets to me. And so that's what
we moved them off the line last year. We drove them off the line. They're not that good.
Right.
That guy's not an All-American. We dominated him. Right.
Like, I think about Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan. Notre Dame had 44 rushing yards against Louisville last year. If I'm Ashton Gillette and if I'm, TJ Quinn and all these guys on defense, I'm thinking to myself, it's like, oh, these guys, cool. Let's just hold them to under 50 yards again. I start to take that personally. And I mean, I get fired up about it, man. I think that I take that personally as a fan. I think about what a Louisville fan would say to me about something like that. It's like, oh, we got you guys. Like it gets me fired up. And so to your point, I think we're going to start to see how this Notre Dame football team responds to that kind of mindset, which
it's
I'm
a coaching,
very excited for.
It's a coaching thing too, Trevor. And it's like, because I mean, if you're a human being and you're a competitor, you have that. I hope that Marcus Freeman doesn't purposely push back against that this week. And like, we've been there. Like, my 4th year as a coach. So I was 4 years removed from college. And I'm coaching against my alma mater. Things did not go well there. I was a starter, redshirt sophomore year, coming back the next year. They brought in a new offensive coordinator. Dude basically benched me before we even got into full pads because I couldn't run his triple option offense. So then we go out to our scrimmage. He puts a freshman kid he recruited. We go out to the scrimmage against a D2 school. I outplay that kid. I'm starting him. But it was like one of those things where, like, the moment we lost a game, I was getting benched. It was like, it was just waiting on me to fail. And so I had some hard feelings about that. I mean, you basically kind of screwed me out of my career is how I felt at the time. We played them 4 years later. Do you think I was like, hey, man, that's 4 years ago, I'm not worried about it? No, I was like, I'm going to show you something. And so we beat them at their place, first round of the playoffs by 11. They were undefeated in their season. You don't think that I had a little something extra that week of practice? You don't think when I'm coming up with all these plays that we're going to rip them up? That was the game I broke it down a couple weeks ago where we were doing stuff where I knew that D coordinator because I played for him. He was the D coordinator when I played. I knew how he played. I knew how his defense worked. So that's why we were doing twins left, because I knew they were going to go corners over. Byron Westbrook's brother was a corner on that team, by the way. And so we knew they were going to go corners over, knew the safety. I played with their safety. He was a freshman when I was a senior. I knew he couldn't cover me still at that day. So we did some things. So, like, I was pissed. I coached pissed that week, and we ripped them up. Threw for like 280 some yards in that game. We didn't throw that much. And I remember walking across the sideline. Players dumped water on me because they knew I wanted it that week, and there was a lot at stake. And the head coach, my head coach, who I played for, guy that I respect, we have a much better relationship now, Sherman Wood, than we did at the time. But he came up, he's like, I told him all week you were going to have something for them, and they needed to be ready for you, and they weren't. And I said, you're darn right. But you know what I'm saying? Like, that's because I was still pissed. That's a competitor in me. I'm going to show you what you missed out on by not doing right by me. Now, this is a different circumstance because this team just embarrassed you. But somebody in the chat said, like, the narrative about Marcus Freeman is, how good of a coach is he really? Because we watched Jeff Brom coach circles around him last year. Where's your competitiveness too? That's why I don't want to see him tamp this down. I want to see him kind of – I like the pissed off Marcus Freeman. That's my favorite version of Marcus Freeman as a coach, not as a human being. Like, I don't want him coming over my house pissed off. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm catching an L on that one. You know what I mean? But I like the pissed off coach version of Marcus Freeman, because when he's pissed off, his team plays pissed off. And when this team plays pissed off, Purdue found out, when this team's got a little bit of an edge to it, it doesn't go well for you. And so to me, that's what I want to see him. Okay, y'all want Jeff Brom as coach? Y'all think Jeff Brom's the man? All right, let me show you what I got. And so those are all things where if this team has that competitive fire, I mean, you don't think the first time Nick Saban went up against Kirby Smart, there wasn't a little bit of extra something in that week of preparation for him, and vice versa. And that's what I'm saying is, if this team doesn't come out and play like they're a team that got embarrassed by this team last year, then that tells me there's a much bigger problem in this locker room. On the flip side, if this team does come out and play with fire and does bring it to Louisville and show all the things we know they're capable of, that tells me there's something burning in there, Trevor. They just got to figure out how to kind of turn it up a little bit more regularly. And that's why I say we're going to learn a ton about this football team, because it's partly about this squad, but it's also partly about what are you developing in your culture with this football team. And it could be something as maybe this team felt so good about themselves that they need these type of challenges to really step up to the plate. That's a theory, but it's a theory that we're going to get tested this weekend. So there's so many different ways that you look at this and say, man, we're going to learn so much about this football team. So much about this football team based on just how they play, just the energy, the fire, all those type of things. And that's why I say this is a big game. And we haven't even gotten to the implications for both teams in this game, which we're going to get into next. But that's my thing is, Trevor, we're going to learn a lot about what you have in here on Saturday from a coaching standpoint and from a player standpoint. Like, you don't think Al Golden, like, I got to think Al Golden's the kind of guy. I don't think Al Golden got to where he is now without having a little bit of fire. He played tight end back in the 80s. Those dudes were tough. Like, they were I mean, I know he caught it, but those dudes had to battle. I got to think he's like, Jeff Brom did a couple things on me last year. I didn't like it. I'm going to show Jeff Brom. I mean, I got to think that there's got to be something. And I know the coach like, no, we're just focused on. Okay, that's fine. You can say that. You need to say that. There's no reason to give Louisville bulletin board material. Give me all the, hey, look, man, it's just another game. We got to, we're worried about Notre Dame. And to a degree, that's true. But I got to think that there's a little something there. And that's what I'm saying is, like, I want to see that, because if the coaches don't have it, then guess what? The players won't have it either. And so that's why I say, Trevor, man, right now, we're going to learn a ton about this football team and who they can be and who they are. Absolutely, we're going to learn a lot about this team and what's right here and what's right here. Yeah.
We're going to learn about who they are as a program, as a whole. I want to see everybody from top to bottom fired up on Saturday, right? I want to see the sideline going crazy. I mean, I remember back in 2022 when Notre Dame was playing Clemson at night and they get the blocked punt and the sideline erupts like they just caught a Hail Mary for a win, right? Like, I want to see some of that. I want to see a team that is starting to inherit the mentality of what Lou Holtz said. We're Notre Dame and you ain't. And I want to see a football team that starts to, I guess, to go off of what Marcus Freeman preaches to his team, to start challenging things and not just internally, like challenge the stereotype of what Notre Dame football is, right? Challenge that narrative of what's been laid out before you guys. And now is the perfect opportunity to do it. Because I think there is a little truth to, yeah, sure, you can go beat Purdue by 59 points like you did. Nobody's going to be like, they're back. You could go and not allow a touchdown to Miami of Ohio and win by 25 points at home. Nobody's going to look at that and be like, yep, Notre Dame's back, baby. The Texas A&M week, Notre Dame is back. Now you have the opportunity to go out and do that. I want to see the Marcus Freeman that's getting in the face of his offensive linemen in the tunnel before the game, getting ready to run out there.
Because it was real, Trevor.
Yes.
Right? Like, that's the thing, is that wasn't faked.
Yes.
That was real.
Yes. Like, I want to see that authenticity from him. I need to see that. And I think the team needs to see it. The fans need to see it. Because that's going to show everybody that it's, you know what, like, this isn't a guy that's just going to lay down. It's almost like that leave no doubt moment in Remember the Titans of like, yo, hey, they're not getting another yard on us. That needs to be the mentality.
That's a mindset.
Yes. And that's what I think the team needs. That's the next step in this recovery process that we've talked about after the Northern Illinois. You now have the skill set mindset of, yes, we're Notre Dame. We have the skill to compete with anybody in the country. Now it's a mindset shift of, we have the skill to back it. Now we need to play like nobody can touch us. And that's what you have to do. That's how you have to prepare.
Right.
Not just play. That's how you have to prepare.
I mean, the best teams that I played on, Trevor, coached on, and the best teams I've coached against, it was almost like they weren't even going into the game thinking about you. They had I like to use Larry Bird references, but there's the story about how Larry Bird went into they were on a West Coast trip, and they're going to play Portland, and Larry Bird basically says, I'm going to play left-handed in this game. So basically, outside of free throws, he basically did everything left-handed for the first 3 quarters. And he scores like 47 points. And you talk to his teammates, and it's like, you take the trash talk aside, that he needed those challenges. That was him challenging himself, saying, I can do it. You know what I mean? Like, because you're always looking for those things to kind of fire yourself up. You're always looking for those little extra edge things. And so it's not even like, hey, we want to go out against Miami of Ohio and they're not that good. It's like, okay, then don't let it be about that. Let's say, hey, let's see if we can score 60 in back-to-back games and play with that kind of fire, because we want to show people this. And that's the thing that I do get a little bit concerned about with this football team is they're not as internally motivated as I think great teams need to be.
Sure.
Now, that doesn't mean it can't change, but that's part of the issue is they do need some of that external motivation. And this week you have it.
Yeah.
And if you don't tap into that, then it's just kind of like, I don't know who this team really is, right? Or no, it's hey, we now know who this team is. And it's not good. And they're going to have to fix that part. But if they do come out, it's a step in that. It's just another step in the right direction. But it's a chance for a much bigger step this week.
Yeah,
against this Louisville football team. Because, like you said, Trevor, man, if you're a competitor, you don't just move on from that. You don't. I mean, I'm watching Notre Dame come out last year against Stanford, and Marcus Freeman is trying to destroy that team. You don't think that factored at all? I mean, what do you have to prove against Stanford? I mean, you're not going to the playoff. They're terrible, but you're out there trying to, I'll say run it up, because I don't think he was running it up. Just like you could tell they wanted to bury that football team. I'm watching him against Purdue, a school that fired him with his third string quarterback in the game throwing bombs.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's a mindset thing. That's why I say I like the pissed off Marcus Freeman. So I have to think, and I have to think that he's going to give us all the right phrases in the press conferences and say all the right things. And he should. Jeff Brom is not someone you want to give bulletin board material to, folks. I'm going to tell you that right now.
No.
And because Jeff Brom is someone who respects Notre Dame. But on today in practice, tomorrow in practice, Thursday in practice, I want to see a little bit of an edge from this football team. And it starts at the top. And then, Mike Denbrock also. A little bit chippy Mike Denbrock. I didn't come here to average 28 points a game against MAC teams. You know what I'm saying? And I think this team needs that. And we're going to find out how well the players respond to that this week. And I'm excited to see what they're going to be. Because let me ask you this. Do you feel like if they come out of this game and play really well, now really well against Louisville can get you a 10-point win, right? Yeah. So it's not so much about the margin where you're just man, they were the more physical team. They were the more fired up team. Like, yeah, Louisville got their plays because A, they got really good players, and B, they got really good coaches.
Yeah.
I mean, I've said this before. I think Jeff Brom's one of the best coaches in college football. And you're seeing, look how bad Purdue was before they hired him. Look at how bad Purdue has been since he left.
Yep.
And then you look at what he did. You know what I mean? While he was there, no, he only went 8-4. I'm like, dude took Purdue to the Big Ten title game in this era.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
He's a great coach. So it's not a game you expect them to win by 3 touchdowns. I mean, could they? Sure, of course they could. I mean, Purdue beat Ohio State by 4 touchdowns. I mean, stuff happens, right?
Sure did.
Yeah. But it's more so about you play well. You're clearly the better team. And I felt that about the Louisville Georgia Tech game. I mean, Georgia Tech battled their butts off. They played hard, but it was obvious kind of from early on that Louisville was the better team, and they played like the better team. And I feel like if you see that from this team on Saturday, you go into the bye, you now have a whole extra week to let that soak in, and you feel like, okay, now we hope that this team can kind of come out of that break with that much needed momentum. That's what you're hoping for on Saturday. But I will say this, I have no concern about this team coming out flat on Saturday, because the one thing we can say about Marcus Freeman is his teams never come out flat in these types of games. Say, well, what about Louisville last year? Clemson last year. Clemson was unranked. Well, I should say this. There's only been one exception to that where his team came out flat, and that was Louisville last year. But like Clemson last year was an unranked team, -8 starters. That was clearly not a focus. Notre Dame just thought they were going to roll over them.
Oh, yeah.
Like now they've lost some of these games, but they didn't come out like 2010, 2022 against Ohio State. Ohio State was clearly the better team. But Notre Dame played hard in that game. Even the Duke game last year, the offensive line stunk, but the defense played their butts off in that game. Right? I mean, Mitchell Evans went off in that game. Audric, I mean, if the offensive line just plays solid football against Duke last year, that's a 20-point win. That's how bad they were. I didn't think the team was flat because I thought the defense shut Duke down. The only game where they did, the only exception was the Louisville game last year. And that's why I kind of feel like I expect them to kind of, I expect to at least see a little something. You got something to prove. You got a lot of people doubting you right now. You have something to prove. And I want to see if that's the case. But it's not the only storyline this weekend, Trevor. There is absolutely postseason. You could say, I don't want to talk about playoff, but we're going to talk about playoff now. Now is the part to talk about the playoff. You can say, well, Notre Dame's not a playoff team. And right now, they're not because they're the 16th team in the country. But if you're going to be a playoff team, this is the kind of game that you need to win. And this is true for both teams. Because, like, for Louisville, you've got two chances to get in the playoffs. You either win your league or you have a resume strong enough to where you can be the second team, maybe third team in the ACC to get in. The way the ACC has played so far this year, I don't know that you're going to get a third team in. It's going to be tough. And for Louisville, this is one of those things that this weekend does two things for them. Number one, if they can win this game, it's a huge resume builder for them. Hey, we went on the road and beat a top 25 team at their place, right? So now Louisville gives themselves a little bit of a buffer if they were to drop a game between now and the end of the season, right? Where they now still have a pretty good resume. The other part is it gives the ACC a much needed boost because the ACC has actually had some pretty big wins this season. You know, you look at Texas A&M Miami going on the road and pounding Florida. Yeah. You know, you look at but they've also had some pretty bad losses. North Carolina getting blown out in a basketball score by James Madison this past weekend. I mean, they've had some rough. Virginia Tech getting beat at home or actually going on the road and losing to Vanderbilt. So they've had some rough losses so far. They need this kind of win to hopefully reinvigorate their reputation a little bit. Because right now it's looking like you're going to get one guy in. You know what I mean? One guy in or one team in. And if you're going to change that, these are the kind of wins that you need. So both teams right now, Trevor, are in a situation where this game is going to have huge implications on what your resume is going to look like at the end of the season. I don't think Notre Dame is going to have the overall resume to get into 10-2, especially if you lose this game. I think this game the only way Notre Dame gets in it with two losses, including this loss, because this may end up being the best team you play all year rankings-wise. It's going to be them, USC, or Texas A&M. Right now, they're ranked second highest behind USC. But you look at it and say, two losses against this schedule of what it's turned out to be because of how bad Florida State is, I don't know if that's going to get you in unless there's just a bunch of three-loss teams you're competing with. So they're not completely eliminated out of a 12-team situation if you lose this weekend, but it becomes incredibly difficult. Like, they're going to need so much help the rest of the way, like so much help. It's almost like you're going to have to back your way in at that point in time. Kind of like, you know, what was it 2 years ago with Ohio State? You know, Ohio State they got lucky getting in because it was like, you know, Clemson lost late in the year, Tennessee lost late in the year, like USC lost late in the year. Remember, they lost if USC beats Utah in the Pac-12 title game, Ohio State's not in the college football playoff in 2020.
Yep.
Now, they made the most of it when they got there and took Georgia down to the wire, but like they needed a lot of help to get into that. And Notre Dame would be like the 12-seed version of that if they have two losses. And so you're talking about by the end of September, your season's basically for all intents and purposes of who you want to be as a football team. And as Andrew Gilmore points out, it'd be your second home loss, right? And so you say, okay, your season's all but done when it comes to reaching the goals that you should have as a football program. That is not a good place to be when you're in year three. So I think from a resume standpoint, Trevor, this is a huge game for both of these teams. And that factors into this matchup as well, because Notre Dame both teams have a chance to make a giant statement this weekend with how they play.
Absolutely. The playoff implications are huge for Louisville on a conference level and for Notre Dame at a national scale. I think we can all agree that if Notre Dame runs the table and goes 11-1, they're in the playoffs. It's just a question of where. Dropping a game to Louisville, not only does it make it, I mean, I don't want to call it impossible because nothing is impossible in sports. We've seen so many things happen. Just makes it so hard for them to get into the playoffs. I just for fun, I went through this morning and I looked at who's ranked ahead of Notre Dame right now, and I looked at the rest of their schedule, and I will say it is doable. Like, there is a scenario.
There's a lot of potential losses in front of people, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Michigan still has left to play. I think they still have to play Nebraska. They still have to play Ohio State. They still have
And
to
Oregon.
play Oregon.
Yep.
LSU still has to play Bama. They have to play Oklahoma at Oklahoma. They have that, so there is a scenario where that happens, but that's not something that you want to bank on, because I think you brought it up in one of the shows that we did post Northern Illinois, and you said that you had a buddy or somebody that you were talking to that said, now that Notre Dame has lost to Northern Illinois, their destiny's kind of out of their hands. And to which I think
somebody said that to me, and I said, no, if Notre Dame runs the table, it's almost impossible for there to be that many teams with 0 or 1 losses ahead of them, just because all the teams that are going to be contending all play each other. That was my point.
Yeah.
2 losses, and now he and I are on the same page.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Even looking at the top 4, Alabama still, or top 5, Alabama still has to play Georgia and Tennessee, right? They still have to play LSU, who's still ranked ahead of Notre Dame. I think they have to play Missouri, who's also ranked ahead of Notre Dame. So there are going to be some losses that come organically on the schedule ahead of Notre Dame, but that's not something that you can bank on. Because by no stretch of the imagination do I believe that the committee is going to put a 9-3 LSU team above an 11-1 Notre Dame team. I'm just not going to believe that.
That's not even a conversation we need to waste time on. If they're 11-1, they're in.
Totally.
I know there's people saying, but they're in. But that one game difference is the difference between, okay, you're an 8 seed and you're out. It's one game. And so it's good that your season's not over with after 1 loss. You have time to overcome that. But 2 losses and you're done. It's going to be like if Georgia goes 9-3 against their schedule, they should get in over a 10-2 Notre Dame team if Notre Dame loses this game, because what are the wins that Notre Dame can point to and say, hey, hey, we're a really good football team based on what? Well, did you see what we did to Virginia? Did you see what we did to Stanford? Did you see what we did to that 2-7 Florida State team when they came to our place? Where if Georgia loses, let's say Georgia loses this weekend to Alabama, loses at Texas, and loses at Ole Miss, they would still have a win over Tennessee. They would still have a win over Clemson, which are going to be 2 better wins than anything Notre Dame can have if they lose to Louisville.
Yep.
Right? So
Yep, I agree. Which is just what makes this game against
now.
Louisville,
If you're going to tell me that I'm sorry, some of the comments today. If you're going to try to tell me that a 9-3 Georgia team gets in over 11-1 Notre Dame team, you're smoking something. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. All right. So I know it's like some of you want to be upset. If Notre Dame's 11-1, they're in the playoff. The only question is where are they going to be seated? Right. So just guys, stop. But 10-2 Notre Dame against 9-3 Georgia, because 11-1 Notre Dame means they beat USC on the road. They beat Louisville. They're in. But you lose this game, and this is why this game matters. It's not even just 2 losses. They'd have a better shot getting in by beating Louisville and losing to Stanford, because at least they still have the Louisville win. The committee has shown over and over again that they care more about who you beat than they do who you lost to. Clemson was a number 1 seed in 2017 with a loss to a 4-8 Syracuse team. Right? But they had the wins. That's why this game matters, Trevor, because you don't have a whole lot of chances to have resume building wins. I would argue you've got 2. This and USC. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's why I say you can't afford to lose this game. 11-1 Notre Dame in 2021. Do you know how many ranked teams Notre Dame had beaten by the end of the year? Do you know how many teams that they had beaten that were still ranked by the end of the year? The answer is 0.
Yeah.
0. And they were the number 5 team in the playoff rankings. Number 5. Right? So, but you lose this game, now all of a sudden, Trevor, your chances to get, so what, you're hanging your hat on, gee, I really hope A&M keeps winning, and gee, I really hope USC keeps winning. That's not necessarily a playoff resume. You're going to need a lot of 3 and 4 loss teams at that point in time. And that's going to make it a whole lot harder. So that's the practicality of what's at stake here, Trevor. I'm sorry. I got to stop responding to the chat, because some of this stuff, it's almost like you're like, hey, let me see if I can say something that triggers Bryan today. Let me see what outlandish thing I can say today. And I think I fall for it way too much. But 11-1 Notre Dame is in. And not only are they in, they're hosting. They're hosting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of my conversation. That's where I'm at.
No, I hear you, man. I hear you completely. And in this game, it's tough to look at as a coach and as a player. You want to take it as a one game at a time mentality, because when you start to look forward, that's when you don't really prepare the best. But you do have to come into this week of saying this is an important game, not only for what happened last year, and not only for what's happened to you so far this season as a team. It's big on a national scale for you. This game for Notre Dame keeps the hope alive of we can still control our own destiny. And that is what is at stake for Notre Dame. And for Louisville, that it's almost it's weird. It's almost like the opposite. It's more like staking your claim. For Notre Dame, it's more like having to like restake your claim. Because let's call a spade here. Notre Dame started out the season as the 7th ranked team in the country and then moved up to 5th. So it's two different narratives going at it here, but both are big for each team. For Notre Dame, getting out of here with a win is going to be crucial.
It's important. And so let's wrap it up here, Trevor. What are we talking about with this game? What's at stake for this game? Practically speaking, resume builder.
Yep.
Big time resume builder. Within this season, big time momentum. 3rd win in a row. Right, you're now 3-0 against Power 5 teams. The good news for Notre Dame is if they win this game, the best part about the remainder of their schedule, no more MAC teams. Now I understand why Notre Dame fans hate playing MAC teams, because Notre Dame struggles with MAC teams, apparently. It's the craziest thing ever. You struggle to beat a bad Ball State team in 2018. You barely beat Toledo in 2021. You didn't play great against Central Michigan last year. You got beat by Northern Illinois, and you didn't play very well against Miami of Ohio. So, and then you went out and beat Texas A&M by 10 on the road, and you beat Purdue by 59. So it's like maybe you should just start playing all your games on the road against Power 5 teams. Maybe that's what Notre Dame should do. But I think this game does, in fact, however, get some of that momentum back for the team. Forget what we think as analysts and fans, just for the team. I don't think that you look back if they win this game and say, hey, listen, we've put that stuff in the rearview mirror. We're now becoming the team we're capable of. And that's certainly what's at stake for this football team. And then also big picture, we're going to learn a lot about the culture and the heart and soul of this football team too, Trevor, by how they play on Saturday. Because there's a scenario in which they play their butts off and lose. And we will have to come to the grips with this team is not who that we thought that they were, but still say, but I'm not so much as concerned about the future because this team was prepared, blah, 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 blah. They just played a really talented football team that just made more plays than they did, but they fought their butts off. They got to fix this. But if they come out and they just don't play hard like they did last year against Louisville, then you start to say there's something much deeper at stake here than, hey, fix the quarterback position, fix the D tackle position, fix the receiver position, fix the O-line. Hey, they had this injury. It comes down to, like, you could put your 3rd team out there and you're going to get beat by Louisville, right? But did they play hard? That's more of what because I can recruit better players and I can, but if my team's not playing hard, that's a me problem as a football coach. And that's why I say is that's just as because there's also a world in which you out talent Louisville, but don't necessarily play with the kind of fire you need to go out there and win that game. And they're the ones making mistakes. And even though you won, it's like, okay, yeah, they won, but I'm still seeing some things that have me concerned about who this football team is. So it's not just the results important, but it's how you get there is also going to have a major impact on it and on who this football team is. So that's kind of where I'm at with this, Trevor. Any last thoughts on the magnitude of I'd say this too. There's also some recruiting momentum needed.
Yeah,
because they got some big time players coming on campus this weekend from the 25 and 26 class, and they got a couple very important visitors coming into town in 2 weeks when Stanford comes and visits. And so, there's a lot there too. They need this for momentum in a lot of ways, in my opinion, Trevor. Last thoughts on this before we move into the breaking down Louisville.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, it's to your point, there's more implications to this game than just what gets added to the win-loss column. right? It's how you win. It's how you go out and present yourself as a team and as a program. And I think this is going to be a big momentum push forward for Notre Dame, because if you go in and you take care of business convincingly, not take care of business the Miami of Ohio style. I'm talking about take care of business the Purdue style, like what you did 2 weeks ago to the Boilermakers in West Lafayette in their house. There was after the first drive, there was no doubt in my mind who was going to win that game. It was just going to be a question of how much.
Right.
And if Notre Dame comes in and, like I said in the postgame show for Purdue, it was very businesslike. You came in pissed off. You came in ready. You had a mission. You knew what you were going to do as a team. You knew how you were going to do it. You went out and executed, and it was fantastic.
Right.
You hop back on the bus and you're back home in 3 hours.
Right.
So that's the mentality that I want to see Notre Dame come out with, from everywhere, from the head coach down to whoever's handing out towels on the sideline. Come out with a purpose and play fired up. And if they're able to do that, I'm 100% convinced that they can walk away with the win, because Notre Dame's roster from top to bottom, you can make the argument, and I do believe that they're more talented than the rest of the opponents on their schedule. Notre Dame is a very talented football team. Now it's just a question of, can you channel all that energy and come out fired up to not just play talented and just kind of be better than everybody else, but feel and know that you're better than everybody else. That's what I want to see, man.
And what we're saying is, not playing like you did against Purdue, where you're clearly the better team, is not going to end with a 59-point win over this football team.
100%.
Right? That's not what Trevor's saying. It's more about where you could, because a 59-point win over Purdue and you play the exact same way against Louisville could only be a 10-point win or a 17-point win, but you're still clearly the best. That's the point, is like you're maximizing your potential against that football team. That's what it means. You know, like against Ohio State, that may only be a field goal difference in the game, but it's about, you came out, played your game. You took that was the thing that was the most different about that game and every other game Notre Dame has played so far. To a degree, I think against Texas A&M, I saw this, but definitely not true against the two MAC teams. Against Purdue, Notre Dame came out as a football team, and they took the fight to Purdue in every phase of the game.
Yep.
They did not do that against Miami of Ohio. They definitely didn't do that against Northern Illinois. It was all dinks and dunks, right? And we saw a little bit against A&M. I thought we saw a little bit of that where they were trying to be more aggressive in that game. But the last couple games, you get into these situations where it's almost kind of like what Marcus Freeman said. Well, you know, they make you be, no, that's playing to not screw up and make a mistake and get upset by this team, right? That's that mentality. But when you come out and you take the fight to them, get them on their heels, this is our house, that kind of thing. To your point, if Notre Dame plays their A game and Louisville plays their A game, Notre Dame's 4-1. Now, if Notre Dame plays their A game, the odds of Louisville playing their A game are slim. That's the point, right? That's the point. Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest difference from a mentality standpoint for me, and it's very slight, but the way that I look at it, when Notre Dame came out against Purdue, it was very much, this is what we're going to do, try and stop it. Versus the MAC teams that they played, it was very much like, let's see if they stop this. And it was very passive. It felt like, let's just kind of, I don't want to say throw it against the wall and hope that it sticks, but it was very like, let's see if they stop this. For Purdue, everything felt intentional. Everything felt like, this is what we're doing. Good luck trying to stop it. And for the two MAC opponents that Notre Dame played, it was very much like, try and stop this, I guess. Like, let's see if they do. So very slight, very different, but I mean, the mentality goes a long way.
So that's going to do it for this part of the show, Trevor. We're going to dive into actually looking at Louisville next. But before we do, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And I'm going to say again, if you have not done so, you are missing out by not jumping on the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Guys, it's truly a great deal. It's $4.99 a month. That's not a sign up and get this great rate. That is the rate that we have. And we're $49.99 for a year. If you're someone who's always said, hey, I've always wanted to support Irish Breakdown, but I'm not a message board person, you can still join the message board. There's ways that you can actually just read our content and not get all the other stuff, which I can always talk you through. But it's also the best way to support us if you're someone who wants to support our channel. financially. So you go to boards.irishbreakdown.com and check all that out. Got an hour-long breakdown of every pass, non-screen pass play, scrambles, sacks, incompletions, completions, all of it in that video. And it's the reason that I was up until like 5 o'clock in the morning last night, finished that. Took the whole day to get that done, but I think it was definitely worth it. I hope you all think that it was worth it, but you're definitely going to want to check that out. $4.99 a month or $49.99 for a year. You can also join one of the booster clubs, and if you get the booster club, you get some cool IB merch for free. If you join the Shamrock or Blue Club, you get a free IB Club mug that only goes to club members. Trevor doesn't have an IB Club mug. I don't have an IB Club mug. Even my grandma, who I have bought 10 mugs for, because she always asks for them. She loves drinking her coffee out of them. She doesn't have an IB Club mug. And trust me, if anyone was going to get one that's not in the club, it'd be my grandma. But she doesn't have one. And if you join the Gold Club, you not only get the IB Club mug, but you also get an IB Club Gold Club t-shirt, color of your choice and style. So you can definitely that. And then, as Andrew Gilmore said, I love the spirit. You can ratio my post on the board. He's taking it in good spirit, Andrew. I appreciate that, man. But funny is, Andrew, you've been one of the more positive people the last week. That's how crazy it's gotten, man. Is you're one of the apologists now, man. What are you talking about? But in all seriousness, it is a great community. We not only talk Notre Dame football, but we have prayer requests on the board for people and family. I've put prayer requests on the board. Other people put prayer requests on the board because we are truly a community. We're not just a message board that talks Notre Dame football. We do stick to Notre Dame football. We don't talk about a lot of other non-stuff, but we're a group of people that help each other out. And I'm proud of the community. I was frustrated this last week because of the constant negativity, but that's about football. I'm frustrated about the football stuff. If somebody put a post up and, hey, I need help, the people that are just doing nonstop complaining about Notre Dame football, answer the bell just like that and step up. And that's why I love this community. Even though we're not seeing eye to eye on football, what makes this group special is when it comes to our lives, we step up for each other. And that's been one of my favorite parts about this community. But, the chat is like that as well. But that community is a whole different animal. And very, very excited to see how that's grown. So you're going to check that out only at boards.irishbreakdown.com.